lucky to have Tobias Ellwood with us this morning. It's good to see you. Very serendipitous because somebody who you'll know well, General Sir Patrick Saunders, I'm not sure if you served with him, but certainly you have served, you did. So he's suggesting, reading between the lines in the Telegraph today, that if we go to war with Russia, we could find that our youth may have to be conscripted. That's a bit alarming.
Yes, head of the British Army, one of the most cerebral thinkers that we've got, a strategist. We need to listen and listen carefully. We've been too complacent. I think I've said this many times with you. What's coming over the horizon should shock us. It should worry us, and we are not prepared. We've had a couple of decades, 3 decades or so since the Cold War. Life has gone well. It's now going to get more difficult as authoritarian states exploit our timidity, our perhaps reluctance to really put fires out. And the best example of that is a democracy on the corner of Eastern Europe that in its 3rd year is now in conflict, and we've not resolved that. So Patrick Saunders is saying, prepare for what's coming over the horizon. There is a 1939 feel to the world right now. These authoritarian states are rearming. There's a risk averseness about the West in wanting to deal with that, and institutions, global institutions such as the United Nations, aren't able to hold these errant nations to account. In fact, the UN, I'll go further, is reaching its League of Nations moment unless it's reformed. So that's where the world is heading. We need to wake up to that. There's a mindset now of this era of insecurity that we're heading towards, but we're still on a peacetime defense budget of just 2%. That does need to change. And the Red Sea is a great example that if you don't step forward, if you're not robust in dealing with those that are testing the envelope, it will be our weakness will be exploited, and it will affect our economy.
Okay, so let's unpick some of that, should we? We don't have enough members in the army, is that what you're saying?
Very much so. The army is now overstretched. It's down to 70,000 or so. Different reasons for that. Pay is now an issue. Accommodation is improving, but remains an issue as well. You're obviously competing salary-wise with the Civvy Street too, so that needs to be looked at. I know Grant Shapps recognises the concerns here. There's also the state of our reserves as well. They're the ones that will be pulled in if we need to mobilise too. But ultimately, as I say, it's a big mindset of Britain recognising just how dangerous our world is going. What is our role to step forward, as we've done in the past, to defend what's important to us?
So you're suggesting the defence budget should be up at 5% as it was during the Cold War?
To jump to 5%, they wouldn't even know what to do with that money straight away. It takes time to procure the ships, the planes, the tanks, and so forth. What we do need to do is quickly move to 2.5% and then eventually 3%. In the Cold War, it was about 4%. But ultimately, we have a Navy which is half the size of what it should be, likewise with the Army as well. And the RAF in the Cold War, we had 36 fast jet squadrons. We're down to about 6 today. And that's just an illustration of just how small our armed forces are. Extremely professional. The equipment is good. It's just not enough to deal with all the threats that we're dealing with. Our world is no longer at peace. We're moving to a world at war. Britain absolutely has a role to play, but we need to upgrade our defence posture.
But do shock tactics like those that I propose General Saunders is going to use during his speech at 10:15 today, do those actually work?
Well, as I say, I think it's going to take repeating this message again and again and again, and there may be an acute event that will wake everybody up to say, my goodness, yes, there is absolutely a threat there, because of course what sits behind Russia is China. There's a dangerous alliance there. Our world could easily splinter into 2 spheres of competing influence. The West, which is shrinking, and authoritarian states under China pursuing and exploiting a very different interpretation of our global order. And then many countries across the global south, for example, looking to see which way the world is going to go.
And looking at what Iran is doing via the Houthis in the Red Sea at the moment.
Great example of, and then what sits behind Iran, of course, is Russia. What sits behind the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah is Iran. And again, for a decade, we've allowed Iran to advance its influence across the region, destabilizing, not least in Yemen as well. I'm really pleased that we are continuing our work in the Red Sea to protect those international shipping lanes. If we did nothing, as some may be arguing, that would have a knock-on consequence to our economy, but it would also give the signal, not just to Iran, but to other competitors, to take advantage of our weakness.
What should we be doing about Gaza?
About Gaza, that's tough question there. The first thing that you need to do is to further the idea that we can get to a ceasefire. That will require a third party to sit between both the Gazans and indeed Israel too. But ultimately, there's a humanitarian issue in Gaza itself. Israel needs to recognize that only a two-state solution is where the world wants to go, where it needs to go as well. There needs to be a summit, in my view, of all the interested parties, the stakeholders, including the Arab nations whose support is critical. That could be held at Chequers or at Camp David. That's what needs to happen as soon as possible, rather than this drifting into a frozen conflict, as it seems to be at the moment.
I'm surprised you went with the two-state solution comment. It's been described by many as a slogan for now, given the state of Gaza.
It's been described as a slogan because we've had the Madrid talks, the Camp David talks, we've had the Oslo Accords and so forth, all talking about this two-state solution for decades and decades and decades, and it's never materialized. Many reasons for that, not least Hamas and what it's done to Israel over the years in sending missiles across, poor governance in the West Bank as well, but also I think a reluctance, if we're really honest, of Israel wanting to pursue this as well. What we can't see is this cycle of violence continue again, where things calm down between Gaza and Israel for another decade or so, and then it all then ratchets up again. We need to determine a long-term solution for this. That requires the Western support. It requires the Americans leaning in. It requires the Arab community, particularly those who signed the Abrahamic Accords, to do their part in supporting the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza.
Let me ask you, let's pivot, given that you're a senior Conservative MP, you were a former Defence Minister, you were former head of the Defence Committee. I'm sure you'll know Simon Clarke very well. He's also writing in The Telegraph. They're doing very well today, aren't they, with all their exclusives. He's a former ally of Rishi Sunak. He's cut him to the bone, saying that he's uninspiring, he used to be an asset and now he's an anchor. What are you hearing in the tea rooms?
Where do I start with this?
Well, remember when we were so-called conspiracy theorists that said the West was getting ready for war with Russia? They laughed, they mocked people like you, they mocked people like me. Well, remember when the so-called conspiracy theorists showed you the Pentagon think tank documents laying out how the United States is preparing to bring back a military draft because a war with Russia and China would cost 3,600 casualties per day, ranging from those killed in action to those who are, mutilated as a result of it. We don't have the men to do it. So we need a draft according to their own documents. Do you remember months ago when we, the so-called conspiracy theorists, said the UK was preparing for conscription, a military draft to battle Russia? Yeah, we covered that here on the show. Do you remember when the so-called conspiracy theorists said that Scandinavia would become the next hot zone for war with Russia? Well, we were right once again, as Ivor Cummings tweeted yesterday. Oh my God, do these so-called conspiracy theorists have to be correct on frickin' everything? This would be getting boring if it wasn't so supremely sinister. Yeah, I wish we could laugh about it, but war is not funny, and the thousands of young men who are going to die is not funny at all. Just look at Ukraine, a decimated country as a result of what these globalists want. But we've been calling it out here. So what is he referring to? Well, conscription in Britain. That's what's severely, supremely sinister. Conscription in Britain is what he's referring to. A draft in Britain to get their military ready for war with Russia. This week, the head of the Army of Britain is warning that they need to get their civilian army ready, face reality that a draft to build up a citizen army for potential mobilization against Russia is needed.
The British Army has warned Brits that they could be called up to fight for the king and country in the event of war with Russia.
General Patrick Sanders today called on the British authorities to mobilise the nation, stressing the need for a shift in the minds of the public to be mentally prepared for a military conflict.
Yeah, get mentally prepared. So what exactly is he calling for? Let's go through this. And he says the British Army is facing the same dwindling military as the United States, and the Army will fall to just 72,500 soldiers by 2025. But they would need 120,000 to go to war with Russia. By the way, 120,000? That's what you're going to fight Russia with?
Right, Ukraine already has lost at least that much in just half of the war.
Yeah.
So what are you planning to do?
Yeah, 120,000. Good luck with that. I'm reminded of the Dark Knight? Batman the Dark Knight movie?
Yes.
When the guy's like figures out that Bruce Wayne, you know, is the one who has all the tumblers going all across Gotham City, you know? And he goes in and he meets with Fox, and he's like, I have this evidence that Bruce Wayne. He's like, wait a minute, so your plan?
Oh, right. Is to blackmail this one individual.
Yeah, like, that's what I think of. Like, you're going to go up against this with that? Okay. And then he just says, good luck with that.
Right.
Good luck with that. See how that's going to roll for you. The general also said he'd like to see the military spending increase, and he'd like to see the nation coalesce around, quote, taking preparatory steps to enable us to place our societies on a war footing when needed are now not desirable but essential. Here's, and by the way, the UK media is really all in on this, really supporting, of course, this new stance. Watch.
But there are reasons why such a senior figure within the military would be saying this, and one of them is to reach the British public and remind them about the state of readiness in this country should the worst happen.
The UK is already involved in supporting multiple war efforts in Ukraine and elsewhere. And while the future of warfare may be unpredictable, the armed forces need people.
I think we've got to be ready. The way the world situation is, it's different. But if you ask the people over 60, they would be up for it. Citizen army, they would love that idea. For the younger generation, I don't think would be up for it.
But Jade, aged 25, disagrees.
Do you think your generation would kind of be ready to step up like that?
I think so, yeah. I think so. Although everybody would be scared, I think so. I think there's a lot of people that want to help now.
The Defence Secretary insisted that recruiting and retaining members of all of the armed forces is a top priority.
Can you give a commitment now? You'll come to the House before Easter to make a statement about what we're doing about retention of critical armed forces personnel.
I am working very hard to make sure that, in common with actually many Western militaries, armed forces, that we do have the men and women we need for our armed forces, skilled up to the right levels and capable of taking on this challenge.
Yeah. So before Easter, let's find out how many men we really need, and how are we going to keep the people we currently have, and then add on the tens of thousands that we need in the UK to go up against Russia.
You know, if you're a journalist and you go out and you say, let's see what the average person on the street says about this, if they talk to at least 10 people, they had to have had footage of someone saying, I do not want that. I do not want my kids to die. I do not want to go myself. They left those people out. So either they really did not find any anti-war voices, or they edited that in a pro-war way. Which one do you think that is? Because I am skeptical that they didn't have anybody on camera that said no thank you to a draft.
Yeah, I mean, there was no one that said no thank you to it.
Not in their piece.
No.
But I would imagine that more people would say that than not.
Like
no,
a
thank you.
25-year-old Jade who's pushing a baby. It's
Right.
like, yeah, I'm good for that.
What about this baby's father?
Yeah, you know, his father, you know, he's down at the pub anyway. I might as well just send him off to war.
Mm-hmm.
Send him off to fight Russia and die, because it's working out really well for Ukraine. In fact, all across the British media, the mainstream media, they're bringing on military experts who support this. Watch.
There's been voices raised showing real concern over our lack of preparedness, our lack of resilience, but most recently over really very abysmal recruiting and retention figures. I mean, the government's plans to have us reduced formally by 2025 to 72,000 soldiers in the field. Now that's well below the lowest figure we've ever been since the Napoleonic Wars. But the sad reality of that is, as our current recruiting retention figures continue, we're actually going to be about 70,000, so we're going to be below even that abysmally low figure. And that trend's been at the case for nearly 10 years. So there's a real issue now about that, plus a recognition that we live in a very dangerous world. And I think the warnings from the Swedish Prime Minister, who's also the Estonian Prime Minister, that actually within 3 to 5 years, Russia could be in a place where they could do us real harm, is absolutely there. You know, we need to get to a place now where, in a way, it hasn't existed for a generation. Defence spending, and how we organise our armed forces has actually got to become a national issue.
Well, that's a chicken or egg argument, isn't it? The world's dangerous. We make it that way.
Right.
So we could either be peace-mongering. I mean, which came first? Our making the world dangerous or our needing the military, right? Peace is not an option there.
Well, he mentioned Sweden, by the way, if you're paying attention. He mentioned Sweden, which is almost now a NATO member, and Russia has warned that they will not stand by as NATO creeps to their back doorstep. And of course, as a result of that, now Swedes are being told to prepare for war. It's like, well, here's the thing. What if they just didn't do that? Why do they have to prepare for war? A country that has obviously been neutral and for more than 200 years. Now Swedes are calling for the population to prepare for war. This week, top Swedish officials have urged people to prepare for a potential war. Officials said that Sweden must brace for potential confrontation with Russia. The Swedish foreign minister said Stockholm must be realistic and be prepared. The country's defense minister said Russia's war in Ukraine could or will come to Sweden. And then I found this fascinating. So Swedes right now are immediate, like when they heard about this, they're heading to the hardware store. They've been stocking up on equipment, buying crisis kits. We've heard from a number of our Swedish viewers who said, yeah, they're scared. They've been buying fuel, buying lamp oil, matches, water tanks, preparing for a war. So what now? What will America do in this effort? What now? What will the American people do? Will they go along with this boondoggle? Will the Americans go along with a draft in the United States? Scott Ritter is asking this very same question.
The United States Army just had a shortfall in recruiting. They are literally tens of thousands of personnel short of what their authorized manning strength is, which means instead of expanding the U.S. Army, they have to shrink it. They don't have enough men or women to fill the ranks, and so certain units, certain capabilities are being taken down to zero because you don't have manpower to do this. And now Congress is talking about beefing up with what? Are you going to go to a draft? Have you run that by the American people?
Yeah, how do the American people, how do you feel about that? About a draft in the United States? You know, this is obviously all the talk in Britain right now and Sweden, but what about the United States? It's been a great mystery over the past few years. Why are, millions of military-age men arriving in the United States? Of course, many of them coming from China with no families, no luggage. They're given money. They're given refugee status in the United States. And you can see here you see this massive line of illegal immigrants standing here, just being brought into the United States with their luggage in hand, just standing here with just like a simple little backpack. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Well, up in early December, Dick Durbin, senator from Illinois, thank you, was on the floor of Congress, and he explained why all of these people are here, potentially.
What troubles me about the debate now about the southern border is it is one half of the immigration equation. Yes, we need order at the border. Yes, we need to have changes in the laws that reflect the reality of the overwhelming numbers from all over the world who are coming to our shores and our border. But there's also an incredible demand for legal immigration into this country even now. The presiding officer, my colleague from the state of Illinois, has legislation which addresses one aspect of that. Her bill, and I hope I describe it accurately, says that if you're an undocumented person in this country and you can pass the physical and the required test, background test, the like, you can serve in our military, and if you do it honorably, we will make you citizens of the United States. Do we need that? Do you know what the recruiting numbers are at the Army and the Navy and the Air Force? They can't reach their quotas each month. They can't find enough people to join our military forces. And there are those who are undocumented who want the chance to serve and risk their lives for this country. Should we give them a chance? I think we should. And let me tell you about...
should we give them a chance?
Let's wrap it up in patriotism.
Die for papers.
Do you want to die? Do you want to die for America? Or is he going to give you citizenship? Bring you in so you can fight our wars? We can go to Scandinavia. We can fight in these foreign wars. It's unbelievable to me.
What about the military now is inspiring to young people to get involved with in the first place? Like, what are, they all know what we're doing overseas. We're like, the terrorists of the world. And it's like, what is inspiring people? Like, if you weren't doing that, if you weren't starting all these wars and you had something that was a legitimate cause, you would have people still joining the military. So it's, kind of crazy. They got to bring people from other countries in order to justify these wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, guys, a war in Scandinavia is coming. I mean, just watch my interview with Michael Horn from a few weeks ago, where he lays out exactly what's about to happen in Scandinavia. It's no mystery for people who have been paying attention. I know many of you in our audience know exactly what's coming in Scandinavia. It's been in the cards for a long time. So what is America going to do? What is the United Kingdom going to do? Are they going to allow these globalists to push this agenda and to push a draft and a military conscription? I really hoped you enjoyed